The bullet missed Martha Kingston's head by inches, splintering the wooden door frame behind her as she dove behind the mercantile counter, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst straight through her ribs. The year was 1878, and Cannon City, Colorado, had just become the most dangerous place on earth for a woman who had witnessed something she should not have seen. 3 days earlier, Martha had been closing up her late father's general store when she glimpsed through the back window 2 men burying something in the abandoned lot behind the building. The moonlight had been bright enough to recognize one face, Dutch Carver, the most ruthless cattle rustler in Fremont County. When their eyes met through that dusty glass, Martha knew her life had just gotten considerably more complicated. Now, crouched behind flour sacks and canned goods, she could hear boots scraping against the wooden planks of the store's front porch. Her hands trembled as she reached for the old rifle her father had kept beneath the counter, only to remember she had never learned to shoot it properly. 23 years old, alone in the world since consumption had taken her father 4 months ago, and she was about to die in the very store where she had spent her entire childhood. "Miss Kingston," a voice called from outside, dripping with false courtesy. "We just want to have a conversation." No need for all this unpleasantness. Martha pressed her back against the counter, breathing through her mouth to stay quiet. The late afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting long shadows across the floor. She could see the silhouette of at least 2 men through the glass. Another shot rang out, this time shattering the window above her head. Glass rained down, catching in her dark hair, slicing a thin line across her cheek. She bit her lip to keep from crying out. "I will burn this place to the ground with you in it." Dutch Carver's voice had lost its false friendliness. "Last chance." Martha closed her eyes, said a prayer, and prepared to make a run for the back door. It was then she heard a different voice, calm and steady as a river stone. "That is quite enough, gentlemen. I suggest you ride on out of here." Through the broken window, Martha could see a man on horseback blocking the street. He sat easy in the saddle, but there was something about his posture that suggested coiled energy, like a spring wound tight. He wore a dusty brown hat, a simple cotton shirt, and chaps that had seen better days. A badge caught the sunlight on his chest. "This does not concern you, Deputy," Dutch Carver said, and Martha heard the threat in every syllable. "When someone is shooting up a store in my town, it concerns me plenty," the deputy replied. His voice carried that particular Western drawl, each word measured and deliberate. "Miss Kingston is a respected business owner here. You have about 10 seconds to mount up and leave before I arrest you for destruction of property and attempted murder." "There are 2 of us and 1 of you," the other man said, his voice higher-pitched, nervous. "Then I reckon 1 of you will get away," the deputy said simply. "Question is, which one wants to chance being the one who does not?" The silence stretched out like taffy. Martha's legs were cramping from her crouched position, but she did not dare move. Finally, she heard the sounds of boots retreating, saddles creaking, horses being spurred into action. The thunder of hoofbeats faded into the distance. "Miss Kingston," the deputy called, "they are gone. You can come out now." Martha stood on shaking legs, glass falling from her shoulders. She made her way around the counter and to the door, stepping carefully over the broken window glass scattered across the floor. When she emerged onto the porch, the deputy had dismounted and was tying his horse to the hitching post. He turned to face her, and Martha found herself looking into the most striking pair of gray eyes she had ever seen. He was probably around 26 or 27, with sun-bronzed skin and light brown hair that curled slightly at his collar. There was a small scar above his left eyebrow, and his jaw was strong and angular. He was not handsome in the polished way of the men in the illustrated papers from back east, but there was something solid and real about him that made Martha's breath catch. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his eyes moving to the cut on her cheek. "Just a scratch," Martha said, touching her face and feeling the sticky wetness of blood. "Thank you, Deputy. You saved my life." "Zachary Foster," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "Most folks just call me Zach. And I am only doing my job, Miss Kingston." "Martha, please," she said. "I think when someone saves your life, you can dispense with the formalities." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "All right then, Martha. You want to tell me why Dutch Carver and his associate were trying to kill you?" Martha glanced down the street, suddenly aware that they were having this conversation in full view of anyone who might be watching. "Perhaps we could talk inside." Zach nodded and followed her into the store. He took off his hat as he crossed the threshold, and Martha found herself noticing the way his hair was pressed flat where the hat had been, the way he moved with careful deliberation, aware of the space his body took up. She went behind the counter and found a cloth, wetting it from the water pitcher she kept there. As she dabbed at her cheek, she told Zach what she had seen 3 nights ago. The 2 figures, the burying, the moment Dutch Carver had looked up and seen her watching. "Did you see what they buried?" Zach asked, his expression grave. "No, but it was about the size of a saddlebag, maybe 2 of them," Martha said. "I have been too frightened to go look. The next morning there was a note slipped under my door. It said if I knew what was good for me, I would forget what I saw and keep my mouth shut." Zach's jaw tightened. "We have been looking for evidence on Carver for 2 years now. He is smart, covers his tracks. This might be the break we need." He looked at Martha directly. "But I will not lie to you. If you testify about what you saw, if that buried evidence is what I think it is, Carver will not stop coming for you." "What choice do I have?" Martha asked, hearing the tremor in her own voice. "Run. This store is all I have left. My father built this business over 30 years. I cannot just abandon it." "You could sell it, start over somewhere else," Zach suggested, but his tone indicated he already knew what her answer would be. "This is my home," Martha said firmly. "I will not be driven out by criminals." Zach studied her for a long moment, and Martha felt herself being assessed, measured. Finally, he nodded. "All right then. We do this the hard way. Tonight after dark I will dig up whatever Carver buried. You will stay here, keep the lights off, and do not open the door for anyone but me. I will have my brother stay outside to keep watch." "Your brother is the sheriff, is he not?" Martha asked. She had seen the 2 men together around town, both tall and broad-shouldered, though the sheriff was darker-haired and a few years older. "That is right. Samuel Foster. He is out at the Brennan Ranch right now, dealing with a property dispute, but he will be back before sundown." Zach put his hat back on. "In the meantime, I need you to stay inside. Lock the door behind me. Do not open it for anyone." "Deputy Foster," Martha said as he turned to leave. "Zach." "Thank you, truly." He looked back at her, and there was something in his eyes that made her heart skip. "I meant what I said, Martha. This is my job, protecting the people of this town. That includes you." After he left, Martha locked the door and leaned against it, her legs finally giving out. She slid down to sit on the floor, her skirts pooling around her, and allowed herself to shake. The fear she had been holding at bay crashed over her in waves. She could have died today. Would have died if Zach Foster had not appeared when he did. But mixed with the fear was something else, something she had not felt in the long, lonely months since her father's death. A spark of something warm and alive. When Zach had looked at her, really looked at her, she had felt seen in a way she had not experienced in years. Her father had been kind but distant in his final years, consumed by his illness. The few men who had courted Martha had looked at her as if she were a prize to be won, not a person to be known. Zach Foster had looked at her like she mattered, like her safety and her choices were important. It was a small thing, perhaps, but in that moment, it had felt enormous. Martha picked herself up off the floor and set about cleaning up the broken glass. She found boards in the back room and nailed them over the broken window, her hands steadier now that she had something practical to do. The physical work helped calm her mind. As the sun began its descent toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Martha found herself watching the street through the gaps in the boards. She saw Zach ride past twice, his posture alert, his hand never far from the pistol at his hip. The second time he glanced toward the store, and even from a distance, Martha felt that look like a touch. She turned away, scolding herself. This was hardly the time for such foolishness. The man was doing his job, nothing more. She was simply shaken from the day's events, latching onto her rescuer like some damsel in a dime novel. Martha Kingston was more sensible than that, or at least she had always thought she was. Darkness fell over Cannon City like a curtain. Martha sat in the back room of the store, away from windows, a single candle providing barely enough light to read by. She had tried to focus on her account books, but the numbers swam before her eyes. Every sound from outside made her jump. A dog barking, wind rattling a loose shutter, the distant sound of piano music from one of the saloons on Main Street. It was past 10 o'clock when she heard the soft knock at the back door. 3 taps, a pause, then 2 more. The signal Zach had told her to listen for before he left. Martha hurried to the door, her hands fumbling with the lock in her haste. She pulled it open to find Zach standing there, covered in dirt, holding a pair of bulging saddlebags. Behind him, a slightly older man with the same strong jaw and similar gray eyes stood watch, a rifle cradled in his arms. "Quickly," Zach said, slipping inside. Martha closed and locked the door behind them. In the candlelight, she could see that Zach's shirt was soaked with sweat, dirt smudged across his face. He set the saddlebags on her work table with a heavy thunk. "This is my brother Samuel," Zach said. "Sam, this is Martha Kingston." "Miss Kingston," Samuel said, touching his hat brim. "Zach has told me about your situation. I want you to know that we will do everything in our power to keep you safe." "I appreciate that, Sheriff," Martha said. She turned her attention to the saddlebags. "What did you find?" Zach opened the bags carefully. Inside, Martha could see stacks of paper money, more than she had ever seen in one place. There were also several pieces of jewelry, necklaces, rings, brooches, all clearly expensive. "This is from the train robbery 3 months back," Samuel said, his voice grim. "The Union Pacific train that was stopped between here and Pueblo. 2 guards were killed. We have been hunting for the men responsible ever since." "Dutch Carver," Martha whispered. "And at least 2 others," Zach confirmed. "This is enough evidence to hang them if we can bring them in alive." "They will know you have it," Martha said, the implications sinking in. "They will know I told you where to look." The brothers exchanged glances. Samuel spoke first. "Miss Kingston, I think it would be best if you stayed somewhere else for a while, just until we have Carver in custody." "Where would I go?" Martha asked. "I have no family left, no close friends in town who could take me in without putting themselves in danger." "What about Denver?" Zach suggested. "You could take the train, stay in a hotel for a few weeks." "With what money?" Martha gestured around the store. "Deputy Foster, I can barely keep this place running as it is. My father's medical bills ate through most of our savings. I have enough to live on if I am careful, but a hotel in Denver. I might as well ask for a suite in a San Francisco palace." The silence that followed was heavy. Finally, Zach spoke, and there was something different in his voice, a hesitancy that had not been there before. "You could stay at my place. Both Martha and Samuel turned to stare at him. "Zach," Samuel said carefully, "you know how that would look." "I have a 2-room cabin on the edge of town," Zach continued, speaking directly to Martha now. "You could take the bedroom. I would sleep in the main room. Sam could spread word that you have gone to Denver, and we keep you hidden until we bring Carver in." "That is completely inappropriate," Martha said, but even as she spoke, she was considering it. "My reputation would be ruined." "Your reputation will not matter much if you are dead," Zach said bluntly. Then his expression softened. "I am sorry. That was harsh." "But Martha, Carver killed 2 men for this money. He will not hesitate to kill you." "She could stay with me and my wife," Samuel offered. "That would be more proper." "And Carver knows exactly where you live, big brother," Zach pointed out. "My cabin is off the main road, backs up to the tree line. Easy to defend, hard to approach without being seen, and no one except you and Martha would know she was there." Martha looked between the 2 brothers. Samuel clearly had reservations, but he was not arguing further, which told her he saw the logic in Zach's plan. As for Zach himself, he was watching her with those steady gray eyes, waiting for her decision. "This will not work," Martha said finally. "You must see that. A single woman, staying in the home of a single man, even with separate rooms. If anyone found out, I would be shunned. I would never be able to return to normal life in this town." "We will not know unless we try together," Zach replied. His voice was earnest, almost pleading. "I will not let anything happen to you, Martha. You have my word. And if it makes you feel better, Sam can tell his wife what is really happening. Mary is the most discreet woman I know. She can help us manage any questions that arise about your whereabouts." "What about the store?" Martha asked. "I can arrange for it to be watched," Samuel said. "Make sure no one breaks in, keep an eye on the property. When this is over, when Carver is in custody or dealt with, you can come back." Martha closed her eyes, trying to think clearly through the exhaustion and fear. Every option seemed impossible. Every choice carried risks. But when she weighed her ruined reputation against her life, the scales tipped decisively. "All right," she said, opening her eyes. "I will do it. But we need rules, Deputy Foster, strict rules." "Zach," he said, "if we are going to be living under the same roof, even temporarily, you should call me Zach, and I agree. Whatever rules you want." They spent the next hour planning. Martha would pack a small bag, only what she could carry easily. They would leave through the back of the store, staying off the main streets. Samuel would lock up behind them and then go wake the telegraph operator, sending word to the U.S. Marshal in Pueblo about the recovered money and requesting assistance in apprehending Dutch Carver. By midnight, Martha found herself on the back of Zach's horse, sitting side saddle in front of him, her small carpet bag tied to the saddle. His arms were on either side of her, holding the reins, and she could feel the solid warmth of his chest against her back. It should have been mortifying, being this close to a man she barely knew. But instead, Martha felt safe for the first time since that awful night when she had looked out her window and sealed her fate. The ride to Zach's cabin took only 15 minutes, but it felt like journeying to another world. The cabin sat in a small clearing, surrounded by ponderosa pines with a creek running nearby. It was larger than Martha had expected, well built, with a stone chimney and a small porch. In the moonlight, she could see a vegetable garden on one side and a small barn that presumably housed Zach's horse. "It is not much," Zach said as he helped her down from the horse. His hands on her waist were firm but gentle, and he released her the moment her feet touched the ground. "But it is solid and warm. I built it myself 2 years ago." "You built this?" Martha asked, impressed despite herself. "Had help from Sam and some friends," Zach admitted. He led her to the door while the horse waited patiently. I wanted something that was mine, you know. Not a room in a boarding house, not a temporary arrangement. A real home. He opened the door and lit a lamp, revealing a surprisingly tidy interior. The main room served as both kitchen and sitting area, with a stone fireplace, a table with 2 chairs, a comfortable-looking armchair near the hearth, and shelves lined with books. A door on the far wall presumably led to the bedroom. "The bedroom is through there," Zach confirmed, following her gaze. "I changed the sheets this afternoon after I talked to you. Everything should be clean." Martha felt a flush of embarrassment. He had been planning this then, even before she agreed. "You were very confident I would say yes." "I was very hopeful you would not be foolish enough to say no," Zach corrected gently. He set her carpet bag on the table. "You must be exhausted. There is water in the pitcher by the bed if you need to wash up. I will be out here if you need anything." "Zach," Martha said, stopping him as he turned away. "The rules I mentioned, we should establish them now." He faced her again, his expression serious. "All right. First, we maintain separate spaces. You keep to the main room, I keep to the bedroom except for necessary interactions." "Agreed." "Second, no one can know I am here. Not friends, not other deputies, no one except your brother and his wife." "Agreed." "Third, this is temporary. As soon as it is safe, I return to my store and my life. We go back to being mere acquaintances." Something flickered in Zach's eyes at that last rule, but he nodded. "If that is what you want." "It is what makes sense," Martha said firmly. "This is a practical arrangement for my safety, nothing more." "Nothing more," Zach echoed. "Any other rules?" Martha tried to think of what else should be said, what other boundaries should be drawn, but her mind was foggy with exhaustion. "I am sure there will be more as we go along. Then we will address them as needed," Zach said. "Good night, Martha. Try to get some rest." Martha took her bag and went into the bedroom, closing the door behind her. The room was simple but comfortable, with a large bed covered in a handmade quilt, a dresser, and a washstand. A window looked out over the dark forest. Martha could see the silhouette of mountains against the starlit sky. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her 2 spare dresses on the pegs by the door. As she prepared for bed, she could hear Zach moving around in the main room, the sound of water being poured, the creak of the armchair, the soft thud of boots being removed. Martha climbed into bed, finding the sheets crisp and clean as promised. The mattress was more comfortable than her own back at the store. The pillow smelled faintly of pine and something else, something masculine that she realized must be Zach's scent. He had given her his own bed, she realized. His own bedroom. Lying in the darkness, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the cabin settling and the creek babbling outside, Martha wondered what she had gotten herself into. She had just agreed to live with a man she barely knew, to hide away like a criminal when she had done nothing wrong. Her father would have been horrified, but her father was gone, and Martha was alone in a dangerous world, and sometimes survival meant making choices that were not entirely proper. She thought of Zach's steady presence, the way he had stepped between her and danger without hesitation, the way he had looked at her like she was someone worth protecting. Nothing more than a practical arrangement, she whispered to herself in the darkness. But as sleep finally claimed her, Martha was not entirely sure who she was trying to convince. The next morning, Martha woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. For a moment, she was disoriented, not recognizing the room around her. Then memory flooded back, and she sat up quickly, her heart racing. She dressed hurriedly in one of her simple day dresses and ventured out into the main room. Zach was at the stove, tending a pan with practiced ease. He had clearly been up for a while, his hair was damp from washing, and he wore clean clothes. The armchair had a blanket and pillow on it, evidence of where he had spent the night. "Good morning," he said when he noticed her. "I hope I did not wake you. I tried to be quiet." "What time is it?" Martha asked, looking around for a clock. "About 7. I am usually up before dawn, force of habit from working the ranch before I became a deputy." He gestured to the table where he had set out 2 plates. "I made breakfast, nothing fancy, but it is filling." Martha sat down, feeling awkward. This domesticity was strange, intimate in a way she had not anticipated. Sharing a meal with a man who was not family in a home where they were alone felt like crossing an invisible line. But her stomach was growling, and the food smelled wonderful. When Zach set a plate in front of her, piled with bacon, eggs, and fried potatoes, she could not help but smile. "You are a good cook," she said after the first bite. "When you live alone, you learn," Zach said, sitting down across from her with his own plate. "Or you eat a lot of bad food." They ate in silence for a while, but it was not uncomfortable. Through the window, Martha could see morning sunlight filtering through the pine trees, painting everything in shades of green and gold. Birds were singing, and somewhere in the distance, she could hear the sound of an axe striking wood. "I need to go into town today," Zach said, breaking the silence. "Check in at the sheriff's office, see if there is any news from the marshal's office in Pueblo. I should be back by early afternoon." "What should I do while you are gone?" Martha asked. "Stay inside, keep away from the windows." "I know it will be boring, but it is important that no one sees you here." He paused. "There are books on the shelves if you want something to read. Help yourself to anything in the kitchen." "I am not completely helpless," Martha said, a bit defensively. "I can cook, clean, tend a house." "I did not mean to imply you were helpless," Zach said. "But you are my guest, and you are here because of danger, not to do chores." "I would prefer to feel useful," Martha said. "Sitting idle will only make me anxious. If I am going to be here, let me contribute something." Zach studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right. If it would make you feel better, I will not object. But please, Martha, be careful. No going outside, no opening the door unless you hear my signal." After breakfast, Zach showed her where he kept supplies, how to work the stove, and how to draw water from the pump outside the back door, which was shielded from view by the barn. Then he strapped on his gun belt, put on his hat, and prepared to leave. "I will be back by 2 o'clock at the latest," he said at the door. "If I am not back by 3, something has gone wrong. There is a rifle above the door and a pistol in the top drawer of the dresser in the bedroom. Do you know how to shoot?" "Not really," Martha admitted. Zach frowned. "When I get back, I will teach you. Out here, everyone should know how to handle a firearm." After he left, Martha found herself alone in the cabin, surrounded by silence broken only by natural sounds. She washed the breakfast dishes, made the bed in the room she was using, and swept the floors. The domesticity was soothing, giving her hands something to do while her mind churned. She found herself noticing details about Zach's life as she cleaned. The books on his shelves were well read, a mixture of practical volumes on animal husbandry and law enforcement, and literature. Shakespeare, Dickens, James Fenimore Cooper. There were no photographs, but there was a pencil sketch on the mantel of 2 young boys and an older couple, presumably Zach and Samuel with their parents. In the chest by the armchair, Martha found a quilt that was clearly homemade, the stitching a bit uneven but the colors warm and cheerful. She wondered if Zach's mother had made it. There was something touching about imagining him wrapping himself in it on cold nights, a connection to family and home. By noon, Martha had exhausted the chores and resorted to reading. She chose a volume of poetry by Walt Whitman and settled into the armchair, trying to lose herself in the verses. But her mind kept wandering to Zach, to the danger he might be facing in town. Dutch Carver would be furious that his hidden money was gone. Would he suspect that Martha had told the law where to find it? Would he try to retaliate? When she heard hoofbeats approaching around 1 o'clock, Martha's heart jumped. She set down the book and moved away from the window, just as Zach had instructed. The hoofbeats came closer, then stopped. Moments later, she heard the signal knock. She hurried to the door and opened it, relief flooding through her at the sight of Zach standing there, dusty but unharmed. "Any trouble?" she asked as he came inside. "Not the kind you are worried about," he said, removing his hat and running a hand through his hair. "But there is news. Dutch Carver and his men left town sometime before dawn. They cleared out of their usual haunts and no one has seen them since." "Is that good or bad?" Martha asked. "Depends. Might mean they are running scared, heading for New Mexico or California. Or it might mean they are planning something and want to lay low until they make their move." He looked at her seriously. "The marshal is sending 2 men from Pueblo to help search for them. They should arrive tomorrow." "How long will this take?" Martha asked. "How long before I can go home?" "I do not know," Zach admitted. "Could be days, could be weeks. These things do not run on a schedule." Martha sank into the armchair, feeling the weight of her situation. "I have never been without purpose before," she said quietly. "Even after my father died, I had the store to run, bills to pay, inventory to manage. Now I am just waiting, hiding, unable to do anything." Zach knelt down beside the chair, bringing himself to her eye level. "You are staying alive," he said. "That is not nothing, Martha. That takes courage too." His face was close to hers, close enough that she could see flecks of darker gray in his eyes, close enough to see the stubble shadowing his jaw. Martha found herself noticing things she should not be noticing. The shape of his mouth, the strength in his shoulders, the way he looked at her like she was something precious. She stood up abruptly, needing distance. "You mentioned teaching me to shoot." Zach blinked, then rose to his feet. "You want to do that now? You said yourself that everyone out here should know how to handle a firearm. If I am going to be stuck hiding for weeks, I might as well learn something useful." A slow smile spread across Zach's face. "All right then. Let me have some lunch, and then we will go out back where the trees will hide us from any curious eyes." They ate a quick meal of leftover bacon and bread, and then Zach retrieved a pistol from his room, checking it carefully to ensure it was unloaded. Behind the cabin, surrounded by tall pines, he set up a row of tin cans on a fallen log about 20 feet away. "First thing you need to understand," Zach said, showing her the pistol, "is that a gun is a tool, no different from a hammer or a saw. It is not magical, it is not evil, it is just a tool. Respect it, understand how it works, and it will serve you well." He walked her through the parts of the gun, how to load and unload it safely, how to check if it was loaded. Martha listened intently, determined to master this skill. She had spent too much of her life dependent on others. If learning to shoot meant one less thing she had to rely on someone else for, she would learn. "Now, hold it like this," Zach said, standing behind her and guiding her arms into position. His hands were warm on her wrists, his breath soft against her ear as he instructed her. "Keep your arms firm but not rigid. Look down the sight, line it up with your target. Breathe in, let half the breath out and squeeze the trigger on the exhale. Do not jerk it, just squeeze steady." Martha tried to focus on the tin can, on the mechanics of shooting, but she was acutely aware of Zach's presence behind her, the solid warmth of him, the way his hands steadied hers. When he stepped back, she felt the absence like a cold wind. "Try a few shots," he said. "Do not worry about hitting anything yet, just get a feel for the recoil." The first shot went wide, the kick of the gun surprising her. The second was not much better. But by the third, Martha was starting to understand the rhythm of it, the way to hold her body, how to anticipate the recoil. "Good," Zach said encouragingly. "You are a natural. Try again." They spent an hour practicing. Martha's arms ached and her ears were ringing despite the cotton Zach had given her to stuff in them, but by the end she had hit 3 of the 6 cans. Pride surged through her at the accomplishment. "That is excellent for a first try," Zach said, genuine admiration in his voice. "Keep practicing and you will be able to hold your own." "Thank you for teaching me," Martha said, handing the pistol back to him. "I feel less helpless now." "You were never helpless," Zach said, meeting her eyes. "But I understand the need to feel capable. Out here, self-reliance is not just a virtue, it is a necessity." As they walked back to the cabin, Martha found herself studying Zach's profile. He was not like any man she had known before. He treated her as an equal, not as something fragile to be protected and coddled. He listened when she spoke, really listened, and considered her words before responding. "What made you become a deputy?" she asked suddenly. Zach glanced at her, surprised by the question. "My father was sheriff before Sam," he said. "Not here, but in a town over in Kansas. I grew up watching him keep the peace, settle disputes, stand between good people and bad ones. It seemed like important work." "Was he a good man, your father?" "The best," Zach said, and there was a note of sadness in his voice. "He died 5 years ago," Hart gave out. "My mother followed him 6 months later. The doctors said it was pneumonia, but I think it was really a broken heart." "I am sorry," Martha said softly. "I know what it is like to lose your parents. My mother died when I was 12. It was just my father and me after that." They had reached the cabin. Zach held the door open for her, and as she passed, their eyes met. In that moment, Martha felt a connection between them, a shared understanding of loss and loneliness. "We are both orphans, then," Zach said quietly. "I suppose we are," Martha agreed. That night, Martha lay in bed listening to Zach moving around in the main room. She could hear him banking the fire, settling into the armchair, the rustle of a blanket. She thought about him sleeping in that chair night after night, giving up his comfortable bed for her, protecting her even in this small way. The rules she had established seemed increasingly arbitrary. Separate spaces, no one knowing, temporary arrangement. They were walls she had built to protect herself, but from what? From gossip. From her own feelings. Martha rolled over, punching the pillow into a more comfortable position. She was being ridiculous. She barely knew Zach Foster. The fact that he was kind and brave, and treated her with respect, did not mean anything beyond simple human decency. The fact that she had noticed the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, or the strength in his hands when he showed her how to hold the pistol, or the way her heart seemed to beat a little faster when he was near, none of that meant anything. It could not mean anything. Because in a few days or weeks, Dutch Carver would be caught or driven off, and Martha would return to her store and her ordinary life, and Zach would go back to being the deputy who had once saved her. That was the logical, sensible outcome. But as Martha finally drifted off to sleep, she found herself wondering if logic and sense were all they were cracked up to be. The next 3 days fell into a rhythm. Zach would leave for town in the morning, checking in at the sheriff's office and gathering news. Martha would spend the day reading, practicing her shooting with the unloaded pistol Zach left her for dry firing, and managing the small chores of the cabin. In the evenings, they would eat dinner together and talk. Those conversations were the highlight of Martha's days. They talked about everything: books they had read, places they had been, dreams they had for the future. Martha learned that Zach wanted to eventually buy a ranch of his own, raise horses. Zach learned that Martha had once dreamed of becoming a teacher before family obligation tied her to the store. "You still could," Zach said one evening as they sat on the porch in the twilight, watching fireflies dance among the trees. "Teach, I mean. There is always need for teachers in frontier towns." "I am 23, Martha said. "That is rather old to be starting a new career." "That is nonsense," Zach said firmly. "My mother started teaching when she was 40 after she decided being a farmer's wife was not fulfilling enough. She taught until the year she died. Said it was the best decision she ever made besides marrying my father." Martha smiled at the image. "She sounds like a remarkable woman." "She was," Zach said. "Stubborn as a mule, opinionated, would argue with a fence post if she thought it was wrong about something. But she had the biggest heart of anyone I have ever known." "Is that where you get it from?" Martha asked, then immediately wished she could take the words back. They were too revealing, too personal, but Zach did not seem to mind. "Get what?" "Your kindness," Martha said, deciding to commit to the statement. "The way you see people as worth protecting, worth fighting for." Zach was quiet for a moment, looking out at the darkening forest. "I think every person has value," he said finally. "Rich or poor, powerful or weak. The law should protect everyone equally. That is what my father believed and what I believe." "That is a rare quality," Martha said. "Most men I have known measured worth in dollars or land or lineage." "Then you have known the wrong men," Zach said, turning to look at her. In the fading light, his eyes were very dark. "You are worth protecting because you are you, Martha, not because of your store or your name or anything else. Because you are brave and smart and determined, and because you deserve to live without fear." Martha's breath caught. The intensity in his voice, the way he was looking at her, made her heart race. She stood up abruptly, needing to break the moment before it became something she could not take back. "It is getting dark," she said, her voice not quite steady. "We should go inside." If Zach was disappointed by her retreat, he did not show it. He simply stood and held the door open for her, ever the gentleman. That night, Martha dreamed of riding across an open prairie, the sun warm on her face and the wind in her hair. In the dream, she was not alone. Zach rode beside her, and when she looked over at him, he was smiling, free and happy in a way she had never seen him in waking life. She woke with tears on her face, though she could not have said why. On the fourth day, everything changed. Zach returned from town earlier than usual, his face grim. Samuel was with him, and from the set of both their jaws, Martha knew something bad had happened. "What is it?" she asked, standing up from the chair where she had been reading. "The two marshals who were coming from Pueblo," Samuel said without preamble. "They were ambushed on the road about 10 miles south of here, both dead." Martha felt the blood drain from her face. "Dutch Carver?" "We think so," Zach said. "They were killed execution style, single shots to the back of the head. That is Carver's signature. He is sending a message that no lawman is safe." "More marshals will come," Samuel continued. "The U.S. Marshal's office does not take kindly to their men being murdered. But it will take time, maybe a week or more before reinforcements arrive. In the meantime, we have to assume Carver is still in the area," Zach said, "and that he is hunting for anyone who might testify against him. You think he will come here?" Martha asked, looking around the cabin that had started to feel safe. "I think he will turn over every rock until he finds you," Zach said bluntly. "Sam has spread word in town that you took the train to Denver, but Carver is not stupid. He will start looking at everyone who might have helped you, and that includes me." "Then I should leave," Martha said. "Go to Denver for real or to another town. I will not let you be hurt because of me." "Absolutely not," Zach said, his voice hard. "The moment you set foot in town to catch a train, Carver or one of his men will spot you. You are safer here where I can protect you." "He is right," Samuel added. "Running now would be suicide. We stay the course, keep you hidden, and wait for the reinforcements." "But what if Carver figures out I am here?" Martha pressed. "What if he comes to the cabin?" The two brothers exchanged glances. Finally, Zach spoke. Then we will be ready for him. After Samuel left, the cabin felt different, smaller somehow. The danger that had felt abstract was now concrete and immediate. Martha could not sit still. She paced the length of the main room while Zach checked his weapons and stacked extra ammunition on the table. "How many men does Carver have?" she asked. "We have identified 3 others who work with him regularly," Zach said, not looking up from loading his rifle. "Could be more that we do not know about. He is careful, keeps his circle small." 4 against 1, Martha said. "Those are not good odds." 4 against 2, Zach corrected, glancing up at her. "You can shoot now, remember. Not expert level, but well enough to help if it comes to that." The thought of actually shooting at a person, possibly killing someone, made Martha's stomach turn. But the alternative, letting Zach face those odds alone while she cowered in the bedroom, was unacceptable. "Teach me more," she said. "Whatever I need to know to be useful if they come." Zach studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right." They spent the rest of the afternoon in grim preparation. Zach taught her how to reload quickly, how to shoot from cover, how to stay calm under pressure. He showed her the best defensive positions in the cabin, where to take shelter if bullets started flying. "The most important thing," he said, "is to stay calm. Fear will make you sloppy, make you miss shots that you could make. Breathe, focus, and do not hesitate. If someone is trying to kill you, you have every right to defend yourself." "Have you ever killed anyone?" Martha asked quietly. Zach's jaw tightened. "Yes, twice. Once when I was working a ranch and we were attacked by rustlers. Once after I became a deputy when a drunk miner pulled a gun during an arrest." He looked at her directly. "It never gets easier, and it should not. The day it becomes easy is the day you lose part of your humanity." That night, neither of them could settle. Zach paced the cabin like a caged animal, checking and rechecking the locks, peering out the windows into the darkness. Martha sat at the table, the loaded pistol Zach had given her resting in front of her, heavy with potential. "You should try to get some sleep," Zach said around midnight. "Could you sleep if you were me?" Martha asked. "No," he admitted, "but I am supposed to be the one keeping watch." "Then we both keep watch," Martha said. "At least we can talk, keep each other alert." Zach pulled the other chair up to the table and sat across from her. In the lamplight, his face was all shadows and angles. He looked tired, Martha realized, truly exhausted. He had been sleeping in that uncomfortable armchair for days, and now he was preparing to defend her against multiple armed men. "Zach," she said softly, "if something happens, if things go wrong, I want you to know that I appreciate everything you have done. You did not have to protect me like this. You could have just hidden me somewhere and gone about your duties. But you have given up your home, your comfort, risked your life. I will never forget that." "Nothing is going to happen," Zach said firmly. "I am not going to let Carver or anyone else hurt you." "You cannot promise that," Martha said. "You are one man against professional killers." "Then I will be one man who fights like 10, Zach said. There was something fierce in his eyes now, something primal and protective. "Martha, do you understand? I will not let them have you. Not now, not ever. I would die before I let anyone harm you." The intensity of his words took her breath away. This was more than duty, more than a lawman protecting a witness. This was personal, deep, the kind of feeling that could not be taken back once spoken. "Why?" Martha whispered. "Why are you so determined to save me?" Zach reached across the table and took her hand. His palm was warm, calloused from work, strong. "Because somewhere between pulling you behind that counter and teaching you to shoot, between watching you pace this cabin and hearing you laugh at something you read in a book, I fell in love with you." The world seemed to stop. Martha stared at him, unable to process the words. This could not be happening. This was not part of the plan, not part of the logical, sensible arrangement they had made. You barely know me, she said, but her voice was weak, unconvincing even to her own ears. I know you are brave, Zach said, his thumb stroking the back of her hand. I know you read poetry when you think no one is watching. I know you hate being helpless but are not too proud to ask for help when you need it. I know you toss and turn for an hour before you fall asleep, and that you hum under your breath when you are cooking, and that you smile in your sleep sometimes, like you are having happy dreams. You have been watching me, Martha said, but there was no accusation in it, only wonder. I have been unable to look away, Zach admitted. And I know this is not the time, not the place. We are trapped in a cabin waiting for killers to find us. But if we die tomorrow, I want you to know how I feel. I want you to know that meeting you, protecting you, these have been the most important days of my life. Martha felt tears streaming down her face. Every rule she had made, every wall she had built, crumbled like sand before a wave. She had been lying to herself, pretending what she felt was gratitude or mere attraction, but it was so much more than that. I love you too, she said, her voice breaking. I did not want to. I tried not to, but I love you, Zach Foster. He stood, pulling her up with him, and then she was in his arms and he was kissing her. It was not a gentle kiss, not tentative or questioning. It was fierce and desperate, full of all the fear and longing and need that had been building between them. Martha kissed him back with equal fervor, her hands tangling in his hair, pressing herself against the solid warmth of him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Zach rested his forehead against hers. Tell me you will marry me, he said. When this is over, when it is safe, tell me you will be my wife. Yes, Martha said without hesitation. Yes, I will marry you. They spent the rest of the night on the porch, wrapped in blankets, watching the stars wheel overhead. They talked about the future they would build together. The ranch Zach would buy, the children they would raise, the life they would make. Every word felt like a promise, like a prayer against the darkness. As dawn broke over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Martha had never felt more alive or more afraid. They had declared their love on what might be the last day of their lives. It was either the most romantic or the most tragic thing she had ever done. But as Zach's arms tightened around her, as she felt the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek, Martha knew she would not trade this moment for all the safety in the world. The attack came 3 days later, just before noon. Martha was making bread, her hands covered in flour, when she heard Zach's urgent whisper from where he stood watch by the window. Riders, 4 of them, coming up the road. She wiped her hands quickly and grabbed the pistol from the table, her heart hammering. Zach was already moving, blowing out the lamp, positioning himself behind the thick log wall near the door. He gestured for Martha to take cover behind the heavy iron stove. "Remember what I taught you," he said quietly. "Stay down, breathe, aim before you fire." The hoofbeats came closer, then stopped. Martha could hear men's voices, though she could not make out the words. Then Dutch Carver's voice, unmistakable in its cold authority. "Foster, we know the girl is in there. Send her out and you can walk away from this. You have my word." "Your word is not worth the air it takes to speak it, Carver," Zach called back. "You are wanted for murder. Throw down your weapons and surrender." Carver laughed, a sound without humor. "I am going to burn this cabin to the ground with both of you in it. Last chance, deputy." "The girl for your life." "Never," Zach said, and Martha heard the absolute conviction in his voice. "So be it." The first shot shattered the window, spraying glass across the floor. Martha ducked lower as more shots followed, splintering the door, thudding into the log walls. Zach returned fire through the broken window, his movements calm and precise despite the chaos. "There is one circling around back," Zach shouted to Martha over the gunfire. "Watch the back door." Martha turned her attention to the rear entrance, the pistol heavy in her shaking hands. She heard footsteps on the back porch, the creak of a board. The door handle turned when the door burst open and a man rushed in. Martha did not think. She aimed and fired just as Zach had taught her. The man stumbled, clutching his shoulder, and Martha fired again. He went down. The shock of what she had done froze her for a moment, but then Zach was shouting her name and she snapped back to awareness. The man on the floor was not moving. Whether he was dead or unconscious, she could not tell. More shots from the front. Martha heard Zach curse and her heart stopped. "Are you hit?" "Just grazed," Zach said, but she could see blood on his arm. "I got one of them, 2 left plus the one you shot." The shooting stopped abruptly. In the ringing silence, Carver's voice came again. "You are just delaying the inevitable, Foster. You cannot win this." "Maybe not," Zach called back, "but I can make sure you do not win either." Then Martha heard something that made her blood run cold, the sound of breaking glass, a whooshing sound, and Zach's urgent shout. "Fire! They are throwing fire bottles!" Smoke began to pour in through the broken window. Flames licked up the wall where one of the makeshift bombs had landed. Martha grabbed the blanket from the armchair and began beating at the flames while Zach covered the window, but it was futile. The dry wood was catching fast. "We have to get out," Zach said, coughing from the smoke. "The barn. We make a run for it." "They will shoot us the moment we step outside," Martha said. "Better than burning alive," Zach replied grimly. He grabbed her hand. "When I open the door, you run as fast as you can to the barn. Do not stop, do not look back. I will be right behind you." Martha nodded, terror and determination warring in her chest. Zach kicked open the front door and they ran. Shots rang out immediately. Martha felt something tug at her skirt as a bullet passed too close. Zach was firing behind them as they ran, covering their retreat. They were 10 feet from the barn when Martha heard Zach cry out. She turned to see him stumbling, blood spreading across his side. "Keep going," he shouted, but Martha could not leave him. She turned back, grabbing his arm, supporting his weight as they staggered the last few feet to the barn. Inside, Zach collapsed against the wall, his face pale. The wound in his side was bleeding badly. Martha tore a strip from her petticoat and pressed it against the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. "You should have kept running," Zach said, his voice strained, "and leave you." "Never," Martha said fiercely. "We live together or we die together, but I am not leaving you." The sound of hoofbeats growing louder, but these were different, coming from multiple directions. Shouts, more gunfire. Martha peered through a crack in the barn wall and saw riders pouring into the clearing, at least a dozen of them, wearing badges. "The marshals," she breathed. "Zach, it is the marshals." The fight was brief and brutal. Dutch Carver and his remaining men tried to flee but were surrounded. When the shooting stopped, Carver lay dead in the yard and his last accomplice was being tied up by a tall man with a marshal's star on his chest. Samuel Foster burst into the barn moments later, his face wild with worry. "Zach, Martha!" "Here," Martha called. "He is hurt." Samuel was at his brother's side in an instant, examining the wound. "You will live, little brother, but we need to get you to the doctor." "Martha," Zach said, reaching for her hand. "Is she safe? Did they hurt her?" "I am fine," Martha said, gripping his hand tightly. "Thanks to you, I am perfectly fine." "Good," Zach said, and then his eyes rolled back and he passed out. The next hours were a blur. The marshals loaded Zach into a wagon and raced him to town. Martha rode alongside, holding his hand the entire way, refusing to let go even when the doctor tried to shoo her out of the examination room. The bullet had gone through cleanly, missing anything vital. With proper care and rest, the doctor assured her, Zach would make a full recovery. Martha sat by his bedside in the doctor's office, watching him sleep, thanking God and fate and anything else that might be listening that he was alive. When Zach woke, it was dark outside. A lamp burned low on the bedside table, and Martha was still there, her head resting on the edge of his bed, her hand in his. "Martha," he said softly, and she woke with a start. "You are awake," she said, relief flooding her face. "How do you feel?" "Like I was shot," Zach said, attempting a smile, "but alive, thanks to you refusing to leave me." "I told you," Martha said, "together or not at all." Zach squeezed her hand. "Is it over? Is Carver dead?" "Yes," Martha confirmed, "and his men are either dead or in custody." The marshals arrived just in time. Samuel had telegraphed them our location when he heard about the ambush, just in case we needed backup. "Smart thinking," Zach said. He looked around the room. "How long have I been out?" "About 6 hours. It is past midnight now. You should go home, get some rest in your own bed." "My home burned down, remember," Martha said, but there was no bitterness in her voice. "Besides, I am not leaving you. People will talk," Zach said. "You staying here with me, everyone will know we were together in that cabin." "Let them talk," Martha said firmly. "You asked me to marry you and I said yes. As far as I am concerned, that makes everything we have done perfectly proper." A genuine smile spread across Zach's face, despite the pain. "You are going to be a stubborn wife, are not you?" "Absolutely," Martha confirmed. "I hope you know what you are getting into." "I know exactly what I am getting into," Zach said, "and I cannot wait." They were married 3 weeks later in the small church on the edge of Cannon City. Zach was still recovering, moving carefully to avoid pulling his stitches, but he stood tall and strong as Martha walked down the aisle in a simple white dress that Samuel's wife Mary had helped her make. The church was full. It seemed the entire town had turned out, partly to witness the wedding and partly because the story of the brave shopkeeper and the deputy who protected her had spread like wildfire. Martha had been worried about judgment, about whispers of impropriety, but instead she found acceptance and even celebration. Samuel stood as Zach's best man, and Mary as Martha's matron of honor. As the preacher intoned the traditional words, Martha looked into Zach's eyes and saw her entire future reflected there. Love, partnership, adventure, home. "Do you, Zachary Foster, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do," Zach said, his voice strong and certain. "And do you, Martha Kingston, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do," Martha said, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Zach cupped Martha's face in his hands and kissed her gently, mindful of the watching crowd but unable to hide the depth of his feeling. The church erupted in applause and cheers. As they walked back down the aisle together, hand in hand, Martha caught sight of her store through the church window. It was open again, being run by a young couple she had hired to manage it while she and Zach started their life together. Eventually, she might sell it or continue as an investor, but for now, it represented her past, not her future. The reception was held at the town hall with food contributed by neighbors and friends. There was fiddle music and dancing, and despite his injury, Zach insisted on dancing with his bride. He held her carefully, one arm around her waist, the other holding her hand as they swayed to a slow waltz. "Happy," he murmured against her ear. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Martha replied honestly. 3 weeks ago I thought I would die in that burning cabin. Now I am married to the man I love, surrounded by friends with my whole life ahead of me." "Our whole life," Zach corrected. "Everything I have, everything I am, I share with you now." They spent their wedding night in a room at the hotel, a luxury they could barely afford but considered worth it for the special occasion. Zach was still too injured for much activity, but they held each other through the night, talking and planning and dreaming about the future. "I have been looking at a property about 5 miles east of town," Zach said as they lay in the darkness. 20 acres with a creek running through it, good grazing land. The owner is willing to sell for a fair price. "Can we afford it?" Martha asked practically. "With the reward money from Carver's capture and what you have from the store, yes," Zach said. "It would be tight the first few years, but we could make it work. Build a house, start a small herd. I would keep working as a deputy until the ranch was established." "I could teach," Martha suggested. "The school teacher mentioned they need someone for the younger children." "It would not pay much, but every bit would help." "You would be a wonderful teacher," Zach said, kissing her forehead. "The children would be lucky to have you." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, dreaming of the life they would build together. The next 5 years passed in a blur of hard work and harder earned happiness. Zach and Martha bought the land and built a small but sturdy house with help from Samuel and other friends. Martha did indeed take the teaching position, discovering that she loved working with children even more than she had imagined. Zach continued as a deputy while slowly building their herd. He proved to have a gift with horses, breeding and training them for sale. The ranch grew slowly but steadily, going from a dream to a working reality. In the spring of 1880, Martha gave birth to their first child, a son they named James after Zach's father. The birth was difficult, and for a terrifying 12 hours, Zach thought he might lose both wife and child. But Martha proved as strong in motherhood as she was in everything else, and both she and the baby pulled through. Holding his son for the first time, watching Martha nurse him with fierce love in her eyes, Zach felt a completeness he had never known was possible. This was what mattered: family, love, building something good in a hard world. 2 years later, a daughter arrived whom they named Sarah after Martha's mother. She was easier than James had been, both in the birthing and in temperament. Where James was serious and thoughtful, Sarah was full of laughter and mischief. By 1883, the ranch was profitable enough that Zach was able to leave the deputy position and work full-time on their land. Martha had stopped teaching when Sarah was born, but she kept her hand in education by tutoring children from neighboring ranches who could not easily get to the town school. They added onto the house, building a proper second story with bedrooms for the children. Zach built Martha a library, a small room with shelves for all the books she loved. On winter evenings, they would sit by the fire, Zach reading aloud while Martha mended clothes or worked on her quilting, the children playing at their feet. It was not always easy. There were droughts that killed cattle, winters so harsh they lost half their herd, years when money was so tight they survived on little more than hope and determination. But they faced every challenge together, and somehow that made even the hardest times bearable. On their 10th anniversary, Zach took Martha back to the spot where his cabin had stood. The burned remains had long since been cleared away, and grass grew where the structure had been. But the ponderosa pine still stood tall, and the creek still babbled its endless song. "This is where it really started," Zach said, his arm around Martha's waist as they surveyed the peaceful scene. "Where we stopped pretending and admitted how we felt." "I remember being so afraid," Martha said, "not just of Dutch Carver but of what I was feeling for you. It seemed impossible that anything good could come from such a terrible situation. Yet here we are," Zach said. 10 years, 2 beautiful children, a home we built with our own hands. You were right to be afraid. I was asking you to take a leap of faith, to trust in something uncertain." "You said, 'We will not know unless we try together,'" Martha remembered. "Those words changed my life." "They changed both our lives," Zach said, turning her to face him. and I would say them again every day for the rest of my life. Everything we have built has been together. That is what makes it strong." He kissed her there, under the pine trees where their love story had unfolded, and Martha kissed him back with all the passion and tenderness of a decade of partnership. When they returned home, Samuel and Mary were there with their own 4 children, along with a dozen other friends and neighbors. They had organized a surprise anniversary party with food and music and dancing. As the sun set over the mountains, casting everything in golden light, Martha stood on her porch and looked out at the gathered people. This was her family now, not just Zach and their children, but this community they had built through years of helping and being helped, of showing up for each other in good times and bad. She thought of the frightened young woman who had crouched behind a counter, certain she was going to die. That woman would barely recognize the life Martha had now. "Mama," Sarah called, running up with a crown of wildflowers she had made. "I made this for you because you are the princess of the party." Martha bent down so her daughter could place the flower crown on her head. "Thank you, sweetheart. It is beautiful." "Papa says you are the bravest person he knows," James added, coming to stand beside his sister. At 7, he was already showing signs of becoming a serious young man like his father. "He says you faced down bad men and were not afraid." "I was very afraid," Martha corrected gently. "But I had your father with me, and that made me brave enough to do what needed to be done." "Will you tell us the story again?" Sarah begged. "About the fire and the barn and the marshals coming later," Martha promised. "Right now, we have guests to attend to. Why do not you two go help Aunt Mary set out the desserts?" The children scampered off, and Zach appeared at Martha's side, sliding his arm around her waist in the easy, familiar way of long marriage. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how I thought I would die in that burning cabin," Martha said. "How that moment felt like an ending, but it was actually a beginning." "The best beginning," Zach agreed. He gestured out at their land, their home, their gathered friends and family. "Look at all this, Martha. We built this together from nothing but hope and hard work." "And love," Martha added. "Do not forget love." "Never," Zach promised, kissing her temple. "Love is what makes everything else possible." As the party continued into the night, with music and laughter echoing across the prairie, Martha reflected on the strange path her life had taken. She had lost her father, faced death, been forced to hide and fight. She had killed a man to protect herself and the man she loved. She had watched her store, her father's legacy, burn while she ran for her life. And from those ashes, she had built something beautiful. Sometimes, late at night when she could not sleep, Martha would think about that moment in the store when Zach had asked her to trust him, to hide in his cabin despite the impropriety, despite the risk. She had said it would not work, had listed all the logical reasons why the plan was doomed. But Zach had been right. They had not known unless they tried together. And trying together, facing each impossible challenge as a united front, had made all the difference. The years continued to unfold like the pages of a beloved book. In 1886, Martha gave birth to their 3rd child, another son they named Thomas. He was a surprise, arriving 5 years after Sarah, but a joyous one. At 31, Martha had worried she might be too old for another pregnancy. But Thomas came easily and fit into their family as if he had always been meant to be there. James grew into a responsible young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did. He could rope and ride with the best of them by the time he was 12, and he had a gentle way with the horses that promised a bright future in the family business. Sarah proved to be the family's scholar, with an insatiable appetite for learning. She devoured every book in Martha's library and begged for more. When she was 14, Martha and Zach made the difficult decision to send her to a boarding school in Denver for a better education. It broke Martha's heart to have her daughter so far away, but she understood Sarah's hunger for knowledge. It was the same hunger that had once driven Martha to dream of teaching. Thomas was their wild child, always climbing trees or catching snakes or getting into some kind of mischief. But beneath the wildness was a kind heart. He cried when animals were hurt and was fiercely protective of his siblings. The ranch prospered beyond their early dreams. Zach's reputation as a horse breeder spread throughout Colorado and beyond. People came from as far as California to buy his animals. By the time Zach was 40, they owned 60 acres instead of 20, and employed 3 full-time ranch hands. Martha never did go back to teaching in the school, but her home became an unofficial learning center. She tutored not just her own children but any child from the surrounding ranches whose family wanted them to have an education. She taught reading and writing, arithmetic and history, and most importantly, she taught them to think critically and question the world around them. On a warm evening in 1892, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Martha leaned her head on Zach's shoulder and said, "Do you remember when I said this would not work?" Zach chuckled, the sound rumbling through his chest. "I remember. You listed about 15 reasons why hiding in my cabin was a terrible idea." "I was not wrong," Martha said. "It was a terrible idea by all conventional measures, improper, dangerous, illogical. And yet," Zach prompted, "and yet it was the best decision I ever made," Martha finished. "Because it led to this, to us, to everything we have built. We were lucky," Zach said seriously. "Things could have gone very differently that day. We could have died in that fire. But we did not," Martha said, "and I think luck had less to do with it than determination. We decided we were worth fighting for, that our life together was worth any risk. That is a powerful thing, Zach." He pulled her closer, kissing the top of her head. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the last rays of sunlight paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold. From inside the house, they could hear their children arguing about something, the normal sounds of family life. "I love you," Zach said simply. "I loved you that first day when I pulled you behind that counter. I loved you when I taught you to shoot. I loved you when we ran from that fire. And I love you now more than ever." "I love you too," Martha replied. "Thank you for not giving up on me even when I tried to push you away." "I never could have given up on you," Zach said. "From the moment I saw you, something in my soul recognized you. Like I had been waiting my whole life without knowing what I was waiting for." Later that night, after the children were in bed, Martha and Zach lay together in their bedroom, the window open to let in the cool night breeze. These were the moments Martha treasured most, the quiet intimacy of marriage, the comfort of having someone who knew all of you and loved you anyway. "Zach," she said softly, "do you ever wonder what would have happened if Dutch Carver had never buried that money behind my store? If I had never seen him?" "Sometimes," Zach admitted. "We might never have met. Or maybe we would have met differently without the danger and the drama. You might have come into the sheriff's office to report a problem and I would have been there. We would have talked, maybe courted properly." "I think I prefer our story," Martha said. "It was not easy or proper, but it was ours. It was real and raw and honest. We fell in love in the middle of chaos and found peace together on the other side. Our children will tell their children about it," Zach said with a smile in his voice. "The story of how their grandparents met during a shootout and fell in love hiding from outlaws. They will think we are making it up," Martha laughed. "It does sound like something from a dime novel." "But it is true," Zach said, rolling onto his side to face her. "Every word of it. And the best part is we get to keep living it every day for the rest of our lives." The years marched on, bringing changes both joyful and sorrowful. Samuel Foster passed away in 1895 after a heart attack, leaving Zach heartbroken at the loss of his brother and closest friend. But even in grief, Martha was there, holding him through the long nights when he could not sleep, sitting beside him at the funeral, helping him navigate the complicated emotions of loss. Mary came to live with them after Samuel's death, unable to manage the large house on her own. She helped with the children and became Martha's closest companion. The two women spent long hours together, sewing and cooking and talking about everything and nothing. James married at 22, a sweet girl from a neighboring ranch named Elizabeth. They built a house on the far corner of the property and started their own family. Zach and Martha's first grandchild, a boy named Zachary after his grandfather, arrived in 1897. Holding that baby, seeing his son become a father, Zach felt the circle of life complete itself in the most beautiful way. Sarah finished her education and surprised everyone by becoming a lawyer, one of the first women to practice law in Colorado. She moved to Denver but visited often, full of stories about her cases and her work fighting for women's rights and reform. Martha had never been prouder. Thomas, true to his wild nature, became a surveyor, traveling throughout the West mapping territories and drawing boundaries. He was rarely home, but when he visited, he brought energy and adventure with him, regaling them with tales of the places he had seen and the people he had met. In 1900, Zach and Martha celebrated their 22nd anniversary. They were both in their late 40s now, their hair showing silver threads, their faces lined with the evidence of years lived fully. But when Zach looked at Martha, he still saw the brave young woman who had stood up to outlaws, who had chosen love over safety, who had built a life with him from nothing. They rode out to their favorite spot on the property, a high ridge that overlooked the entire ranch. From there, they could see the main house, James and Elizabeth's home, the barns and corrals, the horses grazing in the pastures. Everything they had built, everything they had created together. "I have been thinking," Martha said as they sat side by side on the grass, "about what we should do with the ranch when we get older, how to divide it fairly among the children." "We have time to figure that out," Zach said. "We are not that old yet." "No, but planning is important," Martha insisted. She was always the practical one. "James will want to continue the horse breeding. Sarah will need money for her law practice if she wants to open her own firm. Thomas might settle down someday and need land of his own." "You are right," Zach conceded. "We will talk to them, see what each one wants, try to divide things fairly. Whatever happens, I want them to know we built this for them, to give them a foundation to build their own lives on." "The way your father gave you and Samuel a foundation," Martha said. "Exactly," Zach agreed. "The best gift we can give our children is not just land or money, but the knowledge that they come from people who loved each other, who faced challenges together, who built something meaningful." They sat in peaceful silence, watching clouds drift across the blue sky. Finally, Martha spoke again. "Do you have any regrets, Zach? Anything you wish you had done differently?" Zach thought carefully before answering. "I regret the violence," he said finally. "The lives lost, the blood spilled. Dutch Carver and his men, even though they were trying to kill us, they were still human beings who could have chosen a different path. I regret that things had to end that way." He paused, then continued, "But I do not regret us, not for a single moment. Every choice I made that brought me to you, I would make again. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Martha Foster." Tears pricked Martha's eyes. After 22 years of marriage, he could still move her with his words. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me too," she said. "Even when I was scared, even when I thought we were doomed, even in those darkest moments, I never regretted choosing you." They kissed there on the ridge, with their whole world spread out below them, tangible proof that love and hard work and commitment could create something beautiful and lasting. As they grew older, Zach and Martha settled into the comfortable rhythms of mature marriage. They rose early, worked hard, and spent their evenings on the porch, watching their grandchildren play. Zach's hands grew stiff with arthritis, making it harder to work the horses, but he continued as long as he was able, finally passing the main responsibility to James when he was 55. Martha's eyes began to fail her, making it harder to read the books she loved so much. But Zach would read aloud to her every evening, his voice carrying her away to far-off places and different times, just as he had done when they were young. They took up bird watching, learning to identify every species that visited their land. It became a daily ritual, sitting together with a pair of binoculars, noting the birds they saw in a leather-bound journal. It was a quiet pleasure, but no less precious for its simplicity. In 1908, on their 30th anniversary, their children threw them a grand party. Nearly 100 people attended, friends and family from all over Colorado. There were speeches and toasts, music and dancing. James told the story of how his parents met, embellishing it somewhat for dramatic effect, and everyone laughed and cheered. But the moment Martha treasured most came late in the evening when the party had wound down. She and Zach stood in their yard, looking up at the stars, which seemed impossibly bright and close. 30 years, Martha marveled. It seems like both forever and no time at all. I know exactly what you mean, Zach said. Sometimes I feel like that young deputy is still inside me somewhere, willing to take on any challenge. Other times I feel every one of my 55 years. You are still my brave cowboy, Martha said fondly, just with more gray hair and a few more aches. And you are still my brave shopkeeper, Zach replied, though you have traded the mercantile for running this household and teaching half the county's children. We have had a good life, Martha said. It was a simple statement, but it carried the weight of 3 decades of joy and sorrow, triumph and struggle, love and partnership. The best life, Zach agreed. And we are not done yet. I plan to spend many more years boring you with my company. You could never bore me, Martha said, taking his hand. Even after 30 years, you still surprise me sometimes. They stood there under the stars until the last guests had departed and their children had gone to their own homes. Then they went inside together, arm in arm, to their bedroom that had witnessed so many years of their love. The next decade passed peacefully. There were births and deaths, weddings and funerals, the normal progression of life. Zach and Martha became great-grandparents 4 times over. The ranch continued to prosper under James's management, with Thomas eventually returning home and working alongside his brother. Sarah remained in Denver but visited often, sometimes bringing friends and colleagues who were fascinated by the story of the brave frontier woman who had helped bring down Dutch Carver. Martha always felt slightly embarrassed by the attention, insisting that she had simply done what was necessary to survive. In the spring of 1918, Zach fell ill with pneumonia. At 65, his body no longer bounced back from illness as it once had. For 2 weeks he struggled, with Martha never leaving his side. She bathed his fevered forehead, spooned broth into his mouth, held his hand through the long nights. When the fever finally broke, Zach opened his eyes to find Martha asleep in the chair beside his bed, her hand still gripping his. She looked exhausted, her hair completely gray now, her face deeply lined. But to Zach, she was still the most beautiful woman in the world. "Martha," he whispered. She woke immediately, her eyes focusing on him with joy and relief. "You are awake. Thank God you are awake. How long was I sick? Zach asked, his voice rough from disuse. 12 days, Martha said. 12 of the longest days of my life. I thought I was going to lose you. You cannot get rid of me that easily, Zach joked weakly. I am not ready to leave yet. I still have years of annoying you ahead of me. Martha laughed through her tears. You had better. I have gotten used to having you around, Zachary Foster. I do not know how to be without you. You will never have to find out, Zach promised. I plan to stick around until we are both old and gray, and surrounded by so many grandchildren we cannot remember all their names. We are already old and gray, Martha pointed out. And there are 6 grandchildren and 4 great-grandchildren, which brings us dangerously close to not remembering names. Then I will stay until we have so many we need a list, Zach amended. The point is, I am not going anywhere without you. It took several weeks for Zach to fully recover, but true to his word, he pulled through. The experience had shaken both of them, though, forcing them to confront their own mortality. They were in their mid-60s now, and while they both remained relatively healthy, they could not deny that they had more years behind them than ahead. They began to talk more seriously about legacy, about what they wanted to leave behind besides property and possessions. They established a scholarship fund for young women who wanted to become teachers or pursue other education, in memory of Martha's father. They donated money to build a new library in Cannon City, with a special collection focused on Western history. But more than any physical legacy, they focused on spending time with their children and grandchildren, sharing stories of their lives, passing on the values that had sustained them through decades of marriage. On a warm summer evening in 1920, surrounded by their entire extended family at a Sunday dinner, Martha looked around the table and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. James and Elizabeth and their 4 children. Sarah and her partner, a brilliant lawyer named Catherine, whom she had never formally married but who was family nonetheless. Thomas and his new bride, a spirited woman named Anna who reminded Martha of herself at that age. All of these people existed because she and Zach had taken a chance on each other 42 years ago. Because a cowboy had stepped between her and danger, and she had been brave enough to trust him. Because they had chosen to try together, despite all the reasons it should not work. "What are you thinking about?" Zach asked softly, leaning close to her. "About how lucky I am," Martha replied. "About how one moment, one choice can change everything. If I had not looked out that window, if you had not been on duty that day, if I had run away instead of staying to fight, none of this would exist." "But you did look out that window," Zach said. "And I was on duty, and you did stay and fight. Every choice led us here to this moment, surrounded by the family we created." "Do you ever think about what you said that night?" Martha asked. "When I said this would not work. We will not know unless we try together," Zach quoted. "I think about it all the time. It has become my philosophy for everything. When something seems impossible, when the odds are against us, we try together. And somehow we make it work." "We make it work," Martha echoed, raising her glass. "To trying together." "To trying together," Zach repeated, clinking his glass against hers. Around the table, their family joined the toast, though most of them did not understand its significance. But Martha and Zach understood, and that was enough. The years continued to pass, each one a precious gift. Zach and Martha celebrated their 50th anniversary in 1928, a milestone they had never imagined reaching when they were young. The party was smaller this time, as age had claimed many of their contemporaries, but it was no less joyful. They were 75 years old now, their bodies showing the wear of long lives fully lived. Zach moved slowly, his old injury from the shootout sometimes causing him pain on cold days. Martha's hearing had faded, requiring Zach to speak louder, sometimes shouting to be heard. But their love had not faded. If anything, it had deepened, becoming something richer and more complex than the passionate romance of their youth. They knew each other completely now, all the flaws and quirks and habits that drove the other crazy. And they loved each other anyway, because of those things rather than in spite of them. One evening, as they sat on the porch in their rocking chairs, wrapped in blankets against the autumn chill, Martha said, "I am not afraid to die." Zach turned to look at her, surprised by the statement. "What brought that on?" "I have been thinking about it lately," Martha admitted. "We are both in our 70s. We have lived good, long lives. When the time comes, I am not afraid." "Are you trying to tell me something?" Zach asked, worried. "Are you sick?" "No, nothing like that," Martha assured him. "I just wanted you to know. When my time comes, whenever that is, I want you to know that I am at peace. I have loved and been loved. I have raised children and taught students and built a home. I have no regrets." "You had better not be planning to leave me any time soon," Zach said gruffly. "I am too old to learn to live without you now." "I have no plans," Martha said with a smile, "but we cannot control these things. I just wanted you to know." They sat in silence for a while, rocking gently, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. Finally, Zach spoke. "I am not afraid either," he said. "Not of death, anyway. The only thing that scares me is the thought of being without you. We have been together so long, I do not know where I end and you begin anymore." "Then we will have to make sure we go together," Martha said lightly. "Hold hands and step through that door at the same time." "I would like that," Zach said seriously. "But if it does not work that way, if one of us has to go first, I want you to promise me something." "What?" "Promise me you will keep living," Zach said. "Really living, not just existing. Keep reading and teaching and spending time with the family. Do not give up just because I am gone." "Only if you promise the same," Martha countered. "If I go first, you keep living too. Keep working with the horses, keep watching your birds, keep being the wonderful man I fell in love with." "I promise," Zach said solemnly. "I promise too," Martha replied. They sealed the promise with a kiss, gentle and sweet, the kiss of two people who had shared a lifetime together and were grateful for every moment. In the end, they nearly kept their wish to go together. In the winter of 1932, Martha fell ill with influenza. Despite the best care the doctors could provide, she weakened rapidly. She was 80 years old, and her body simply did not have the strength to fight off the infection. Zach never left her side. He held her hand, talked to her, read to her from their favorite books. Their children came to say goodbye, and then their grandchildren, and finally their great-grandchildren, the youngest of whom was only 2 years old. On a snowy evening in February, Martha opened her eyes one last time. The room was full of family, but her eyes found Zach immediately, as they always did. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Always," Zach replied, tears streaming down his face. "I am right here, my love. I am right here." "It worked," Martha said, her voice barely audible. "Everything worked. We tried together and it worked." "It did," Zach agreed. "You were right to trust me all those years ago. We built something beautiful together." "I love you," Martha said. "I love you too," Zach replied. "I will love you forever." Martha smiled, squeezed his hand one last time, and closed her eyes. She passed peacefully, surrounded by the family she and Zach had created, leaving behind a legacy of love and courage and commitment. Zach was devastated by her loss. For 54 years, Martha had been his partner, his best friend, his reason for getting up in the morning. Without her, the world felt empty and colorless. But he had made her a promise, and Zachary Foster was a man who kept his promises. He kept living, even when it hurt. He spent time with his children and grandchildren, sharing stories of Martha, keeping her memory alive. He continued to watch his birds and tend his horses, finding solace in the familiar routines they had shared. Late in the evening, he would sit on the porch in Martha's rocking chair, wrapped in the quilt she had made, and talk to her as if she were still there. He told her about his day, about the family, about the birds he had seen. And sometimes, in the whisper of the wind through the pines or the song of a meadowlark at dawn, he could almost hear her voice answering him. Zach lived for 3 more years after Martha's death, a testament to both his strong constitution and his determination to keep his promise. In that time, he saw the birth of 2 more great-grandchildren and the marriage of his youngest grandchild. He finished writing down the full story of how he and Martha met, fought, and fell in love, creating a record for future generations. On a spring morning in 1935, Zach Foster died peacefully in his sleep. He was 82 years old, and he went with a smile on his face. Some say he was dreaming of Martha, of the life they had built together, of the love that had sustained them through more than 5 decades of marriage. They buried him next to Martha in the small cemetery on the edge of their property, under a massive ponderosa pine that had stood there since before they were born. The gravestone was simple, bearing both their names, the years of their births and deaths, and a single inscription that summed up their entire philosophy of life. We tried together. In the years and decades that followed, the story of Martha and Zach Foster became part of local legend. Their descendants would gather every year on the anniversary of their wedding, telling and retelling the tale of the brave shopkeeper and the cowboy who protected her, of how they fell in love while hiding from outlaws, of the life they built from nothing but hope and determination. The ranch they established remained in the family for generations, a testament to their hard work and vision. The scholarship fund they created sent dozens of young women to college, opening doors that might otherwise have remained closed. The library they helped build became a cornerstone of the community, introducing countless children to the joy of reading. But their greatest legacy was not measured in land or money or buildings. It was measured in the love they shared, in the family they raised, in the example they set of what marriage could be when 2 people committed to trying together, no matter what obstacles stood in their way. Because Martha had been right that first night when she said it would not work. By all logical measures, their plan was doomed to fail. A single woman hiding in a bachelor's cabin, facing down professional killers, trying to build a relationship in the midst of danger and impropriety, it should not have worked. But Zach had also been right. They would not know unless they tried together. And trying together made all the difference. Their individual strengths combined, covering each other's weaknesses, supporting and encouraging and loving through every challenge. In the end, love was not about finding the perfect person or the perfect circumstances. It was about finding someone worth trying for, worth fighting for, worth building a life with despite all the reasons it might not work. It was about choosing partnership over perfection, commitment over certainty, and faith over fear. Martha and Zach Foster tried together. And in doing so, they created something that lasted far beyond their own lifetimes, a love story that would inspire their descendants for generations to come. A story of courage and faith, of risk and reward, of 2 people who looked at impossible odds and decided to try anyway. And it worked. Against all odds, despite every obstacle, in the face of danger and doubt, it worked. Because they tried together, and that made all the difference.